All right, so I'm building some arrows for my Black Widow recurve. I'm building these a little bit different than I have arrows in the past. I'm using a 3-inch high profile feather. I'm using a helical clamp on a Bitzenberger. And I've got my Bitzenberger jig set up for 90 degrees, which is gonna put 4 feathers on there evenly. Normally I run 3 feathers and that's at 120. So I start at the back, putting just a real thin bead on a feather. You'll notice you can run a little more glue. If this was a blazer, I'd run that bead and then I would take the top of this and I would smear it down. That's all I run on a blazer. On a feather, I leave it on there and it's a bead, it's a visible bead. I set the clamp on there flat before I push it down. And then when I push it down, I hold it. I look at the whole quill. I look at the top and the bottom, make sure that it's getting good contact, and I hold it for a little bit. I use that gel glue so it doesn't run. A lot of these real thin cyanoacrylate super glue type glues, okay, and then I'll set my timer for 15 minutes. But so that's getting the fletching on. And I'm trying, the reason I'm running a 4 fletch is because I ran some 4 fletch 4-inch shield cuts and they did great. I've seen a lot of information in guys that are running 2-inch high profiles. So I found these are 3s. This is smaller diameter. These are gold tip traditional classics. So it's a 204 inside diameter, just like an Easton Axis. They're 10 grains, but that's what I'm gonna try to run. So basically, what I started out with was, this is how they come. They're 32 inches right out of the package. They start out just like this. I knew I wanted to keep this footed in, the dark looking part. I wanted to keep as much of it as I could. So I went ahead and I took the inserts like this. I went ahead and I mixed up some epoxy and I went ahead and epoxied the inserts in like that. I'm not gonna do my cutting from this end. I did all my cutting from this end when I did the bear shaft tune. I just popped the knockout, cut an inch off, pop it back in. I used the 5-minute epoxy and even that was too fast. I wish I had used like a 5-hour epoxy or something like that, but I couldn't find any. So I went ahead, first thing I did, I epoxied the inserts in to do my bear shafting, and I left it 32 inches. These inserts are 75 grains. So I put 125 grain fill point in here to give me 200 grains up front. On a 500 arrow shaft, I knew about where to start just based on past experience. These are the arrows that I shoot out of my recurve currently. They're 500 spine, same as these. They're Easton aluminums. They've got a little 14 grain aluminum insert, and I shoot a 225 grain point. They're shorter. They've also got wraps, bigger veins, and knock bushings. So there's a lot of weight back here, and that helps it. All the weight on this end stiffens it up, shortening it stiffens it up. So they've got some things going for it, and they tune great with a 225. So I knew if I started with a full length, these are the ones I shoot out of my longbow, they're 500s. They're 31 inches long with 225 up front. So in my experience with putting 200 grains on the front of stuff, I had an idea that I was gonna be in a 500 spine and that it was gonna be less than 32 inches. But so I shot it anyways. And when I shot the first arrow, it was to the right side of the bullseye, and the knot, it was sticking in the target like this. So I came inside, I've got a chop saw in the garage, a little carbon arrow cutoff saw. I got it set up on the measurement deal, and I took an inch off, went back outside, shot it, and every time I do that, I use a squaring tool and I square the end of it so the knock is square. I also squared this in before I put the insert in so that you know your piece of carbon square on both ends, square to the world. So shot it again, still spine weak, cut another inch off. Anyways, I ended up cutting about 3 inches off of these arrows. This is how much shorter they are now. Before I started getting the arrow flight that I wanted. I still haven't put vanes on or feathers on any of them. This is just the first arrow out of the box, shooting it outside. So I got to the length that the arrow was sticking right in the bullseye, dead center. It was flying perfect with no feathers on it. So left my arrow cutting jig like it was and cut the rest of my carbon shafts. Then I took acetone, 100% acetone, and I removed the labels because cutting them where I did, it was going to put the label in a weird spot. I didn't like the look of it. So with acetone is how I got the label off, and it won't affect the wood grain image at all. It just works on this water seal is basically I think what this is. It's like a sticker that they had put on it. But anyways, so then I put them in my jig, and once I got them in here, this jig is adjustable. You take an Allen key and you loosen these up. And I set this on here on a bare shaft with no feather in there or anything, and I got it kind of eyeballed where it looked like it was lined up, and then I snugged these things up. Then I took and put a feather in there, and it looked like the quill was making good contact. So then I tightened them up, built an arrow. Well, I can't find it, but you'll notice there's one of these arrows that's not as good as the rest of them. That was my first arrow. So you're just gonna have to, when you're setting it up for the first time, in the first batch, a new diameter, new everything, because the last set of arrows I fletched on this were these. These are the last set of arrows I fletched. Different diameter, different feather, different everything. So I had to get it set up, built an arrow, got it out, shot great, and I got to looking at it, and I noticed that on one end, the front leading edge of that wasn't making real good contact on all of them. So I came back and on my second arrow, made a few adjustments and got it just right. So now all the rest of them will be perfect. That arrow is one, I'll tell you which one it is. It's this one. I've got a field tip in here that's got some plier marks on it. And this is the one, I'll always shoot this for practice. I'll just always practice with it. Usually, if I can, I'll shoot it in the target first in case I bust the end of it or something like that. That's my junkiest arrow just because of the way the feathers came out. But I'm gonna make up a dozen of these, and I'm only shooting them out of my recurve, and I'll shoot my recurve here in a second. Because once I get a batch of them made, then I'm gonna have to knock tune them in the target. Because these aren't spine aligned and indexed by the spine, when you shoot a dozen of them, there'll be a couple of outliers. Mark them and shoot them again. If they're an outlier 2 times in a row or 3 times in a row, chances are you need to turn that knock a quarter turn. It's easy to do with 4 fletch. You just take and, if it's oriented like this and you shoot it and it's not grouping good, I would turn it 1, shoot it again. I would do that each time until you bring it in, and eventually you'll bring it into where all your arrows, you'll bring all those outliers in and all your arrows will be grouping in one spot at 20 yards, and then you've got them all spine aligned like they should be, because there's a stiff side and a weak side on carbon arrows. Some companies like Victory, they come with a spine index. Some people can roll them and tell where it's at, what's the stiff side and what's the weak side. I just shoot mine. That's the best thing to do. Shoot them so you know how they're reacting to the bow. not to some machine or to you spin them. Just shoot them all and index them that way. And you can do that with your compound bow too. But so I'll do 15 minutes per vein. And it's crazy, after I cut these and I compared them to my other ones that shot good, that were 500 spine. Look at that. They ended up, I mean, they're like 1/4 of an inch from each other, you know, arrow to arrow. So these came out, for some reason, these seem like they were a little bit weaker than the aluminums. It might be because they're lighter, but for whatever reason, they came out a 1/4 inch different. That's pretty good, because I wasn't comparing them. It would have been, if I would have just taken them and went in there and chopped them the same length, you can get in trouble that way, because you can end up with an arrow that's too stiff, and then you got to go up and wait and change. But anyways, it'll work out good. I'll shoot 125 grain 2-blade broadheads that I've got, and I've already gotten mine what I'm going to shoot. But you know, normally I build arrows to my broadhead. I find a broadhead that I like, and then I build an arrow off of it. That's what I did with these two setups. In this case, because the insert was so heavy, 75 grain on the insert, I had to, I would have either had to have 300 grains up front, which I did not want to do, or build down and go to a lighter broadhead. The only thing I have against lighter broadheads is sometimes they don't have a steel ferrule. So I think I found one. The one I have in mine, I think, has a steel ferrule or titanium. So you can get usually you have to get a heavier. The only reason I shoot a heavier broadhead normally is because it's all steel. And usually the all steel start around 150 and up, 175, 200 and up. Any 300 grain broadhead you get, you know, 250, 300 is going to be all steel. So I'm normally trying to shoot an all steel broadhead. There's some really good ones out on the market now, though. They're really strong. And they've got aluminum ferrules in the 125 grain category. But by the time season gets here, I've already got my longbow. I made the other video about my longbow setup, and I'm good to go on my longbow. I might get lucky. I might be able to shoot these arrows out of my longbow as well. I don't know. But primarily, I don't want to change anything. There's a guy, he's a real good elk hunter, Dan Evans, and he always preaches about you need to have your hunting setup finalized in July. You know, July 1st or whatever it is. He's got his, I always, you know, wanted to have my setups like he does. I wanted to have them way ahead of time where you practice with them, you're comfortable with them. So that's what I'm trying to do this year. It's super hot, and it's the fishing for me is not any good right now because if all the fish are offshore. So I'm just trying to get some hunting stuff in order. I'll go back to fishing, making some more fishing videos whenever it gets a little bit cooler. Right now I'm just trying to get some hunting stuff knocked out. But we'll go out here and shoot a few out of the recurve just for fun, just so we can watch them fly. Kate, back up. Come here, Kate. Kate. Come here. So I'll do a video about my bow. This is my Black Widow. It's a PSAX exotic or whatever. But yeah, it's got enough mass weight to it that I'm not worried about it changing the tune of the arrow. I think the arrows will tune just fine, even when I add my hunting quiver to it. I'm probably going to just add a 4-arrow quiver. But anyways, I'll make another video later on when we get closer to closer to deer season, about whenever I finalize my broadhead and finalize my arrow setup, quiver. When I get everything finalized, I'm hurrying to try to get that done. But when I get everything finalized, I'll make another video about my setup on my recurve. I've already did the one on my longbow, and I kind of want to do the same thing for this bow. I just want to have a dedicated arrow setup and shoot one arrow out of this bow, one arrow set up out of my other one, and then just leave them alone, not tinker. It's hard for me because I tinker with stuff all the time, but I'm gonna try to leave everything alone. My compound, my recurve, my longbow. I've got 3 bows I'm gonna hunt with this year. I'm gonna leave them set up and just stick with them.